We are not selling a product, we are selling a story. And actually the fashion industry is all about storytelling. It's the story that that brand is telling you, is the belonging of being part of a tribe. And that tribe has been built through a consistent storytelling of what that brand is all about. So we actually believe that our role within the ecosystem of digital fashion is to be a curated storytelling brand. That is what how identities will be formed. And especially in these early days of the industry, it is about giving the meaning, the deeper meaning, not only the functional meaning where I can wear it, but the emotional meaning of why should I care about it.
GM, and welcome back to the NFT Now podcast. I'm Matt Medved, and today's guests are Kerry Murphy and Adrian Pereira from The Fabricant, a leading digital-only fashion house based in the Netherlands, establishing the concept of non-physical couture. They famously created and sold the first fashion NFT back in 2019 for $9,500 and have partnered with the likes of Google, Adidas, Off-White, and H&M. On this episode, I'm joined by a very special guest co-host. Aphrodite Zuri is an independent curator and key advisor for Now Media, who leads our Now Runway vertical focused on digital fashion and luxury. She first introduced me to the Fabricant's work earlier this year, and I'm excited to welcome her on today's episode. If you haven't already checked out our digital fashion vertical Now Runway, head to nftnow.com/runway. Each week, we report to you from the front lines of the digital fashion revolution. Speaking of the front lines, we're catching up with the Fabricant live from New York Fashion Week. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Kerry and Adriana from the Fabricant on the NFT Now podcast. How are we doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Very good, very good. Excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. Excited to have Aphrodite Zuri, our guest co-host and the lead for all things Now Runway digital fashion at NFT Now. It's going to be really special. Have her a part of this conversation as well. Before we jump into all of the things that you're building, let's just get a little bit of the backstory. How did you form the Fabricant? What was the vision there?
Cool, great question. And I would say it started initially around 2016, and it was a weird time in the world where fashion was kind of going through digital transformation. But no one was really picking up on it. The fashion industry was talking about 3D in a very archaic way, kind of like how we used to talk about 3D back 30 years ago. So it was quite, easy discovery in the sense that digital fashion was going to happen, since every single other design industry had gone through digital transformation. And our third co-founder, Amber, who's not here today, was actually the world's first digital-only fashion designer to graduate out of a fashion institute with a digital-only portfolio. So back in 2016, it's not so crazy to talk about digital assets. Gaming industry was already big. Visual effects industry was big. Photography, architecture, all of these design industries gone through digital transformation, yet fashion had only started that journey. So myself, having come from film and visual effects, kind of started seeing the same trends as I had seen with the visual effects world that had gone through digital transformation about 20 years prior. And it was kind of easy to piece the things together and be like, hey, well, fashion's only going to get more digital. And there was not a single company called a digital fashion house. And it's not a crazy concept. You just take a concept of a fashion house and you put digital in front of it. And it's basically a company who designs digital only clothing. And at that point, we were like, well, where does digital clothing play a role? It plays a role in games, it plays a role in social media, and it plays a role with fashion brands. So there was already a clear indication of an early market. So we started basically just trying out some technology, bringing together some 3D tools from the fashion industry, 3D tools from the visual effects industry, duct taping them together to start creating a very high quality content around digital only clothing. And through that, in 2017, did like a full year of business development with fashion brands and with gaming brands. And it was very clear that gaming publishers was a hard stop. It was very, very hard to get through the gatekeepers in that industry to start putting your own assets into the games. But the excitement was coming from the fashion brands, and where they really want to use it mainly as a marketing tool at that point, because it was this storytelling for fashion brands to say, look how cool I am, look how unique and innovative I am, because they were already starting to talk about Gen Z back then, that they needed a way to connect to these youth audiences through this language of technology and innovation. So in 2018, we started as a so-called service agency servicing these brands. And then in 2019, we moved into a company that was really focused on designing digital-only clothing. And then Adriana working on the, let's say, the platform side of things. So we always wanted to be a scalable tech company, scaling the production and distribution of digital clothing, while always focusing on one thing: how do we ensure that clothing or fashion is as beautiful and as crafty in the digital world as it is in the physical world? And that's kind of how we got started in a nutshell. Adriana, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think adding to that, a lot of what the Fabricant started in the beginning, the mission remains the same, and was very much inspired by Amber, the creative director, who created this digital collection. And her hypothesis, which, by the way, the fun fact is that she almost didn't graduate, because back then schools didn't accept how come fashion is digital. You need to have a physical show, right? And she made a digital show, a holographic digital show back then. But her hypothesis was if fashion is all about self-expression, right? That's why we dress differently, because we want to express ourselves differently. And we want to express differently because we want to create connections. And if all our connections are now digital, why can't we have digital fashion, right? It's the most natural thing, because we are living digital lives. Look at this, right? It's a complete digital lifestyle. And that hypothesis of we should be finding new ways to express ourselves digitally, because that's where we're spending most of our lives, is what drove our belief that the Fabricant had a place of right. As Carrie was saying, now in the early days, we were in stages talking about it, and people were like, what? And it took some time to get it off the ground. We had to service the industry in a service model until we really, I think, met blockchain in 2019 together with the team of Dappers and Dapper Labs, and did the first dress auction. Back then, OpenSea didn't exist, right? So we sold it for 54 ETH, our one digital dress, which we call like the Mona Lisa of digital fashion. And we looked at that technology and said, like, wow, this will make it possible. This will make it possible for an industry to exist. And we never left ever since. Then became part of our tech stack, became part of our development, and became part of our strategy to scale and ultimately make it an industry which we believe one day will be larger than the physical one.
Fantastic hearing your origin story. And Adriana, you touched upon this earlier, but what gave you the conviction to double down on digital fashion so early?
Yeah, like in a way, we're purpose-driven, the three of us. And when we had that strong belief that there was a need for the fashion industry to change because it's one of the least sustainable industries in the world, because it's an industry that actually hasn't innovated, and because we believe that there is an opportunity to really make it more accessible, make it more creative. So there was like a very strong purpose, I would say, almost that naive purpose of we can change this industry, we can make it better. And then we start adding the piece of, okay, but what is the business model here? My background is in fashion, in physical fashion. I worked for larger brands and retailers, Carrie from the technology, Amber from the creative. So we had that kind of really beautiful triangle of we can reinvent it, and we had the three dimensions of it. And then we start trying it out. And as we tried it out, we saw that there was appetite. As Carrie said in the beginning, the appetite was more, hey, we can express our stories differently. That was very much from the fashion industry. To when COVID hit, actually we need solutions to digitalize the industry. So we also did more like, reinventing how you present fashion, from digital showrooms, digital shows. And then as we start developing our tech stack and really becoming what we call this platform for brands and creators, and NFTs becoming more and more understood, or blockchain becoming more and more understood as a technology, we saw that there is now a new phase that we all are coming in, where digital fashion and the ownership of digital fashion and wearing digital fashion is more and more getting close to, I would say, becoming mainstream, right? There are a few hurdles to get there, but it's almost like every year as we got into the journey and we were between like the purpose and being pragmatic, looking at looking where the demand was and adapting our business model towards it, it was always like a confirmation of the path moving forwards, and we kept going. I don't know, Carrie, do you want to add something there?
Yeah, I mean, shortly, it was, as I was saying as well, the fashion industry was only starting its digital transformation. We already live in a digital age, so how come digital fashion is not one of the mainstream things for us? And then, of course, looking at other technology providers, what was happening, Instagram coming up with AR filters, Snap coming up with AR filters. So AR was starting to be kind of a growing technology in 2019. So of course it was very clear that this was going to play a role in fashion. And then the other one is, of course, in gaming. Gaming started having the conversation of what would it actually mean to bring assets from the outside world into this game. So something like Nike collaborating with Fortnite, Balenciaga collaborating with Fortnite. So we started kind of seeing these collaborations between the fashion industry and gaming industry. So there's like very strong signals of the whole industry going towards these digital technologies, not only from kind of the entertainment side, but really from the interactive side, where we start seeing functional purpose digital fashion being used in film, in games, in social media, everywhere. And of course, what we do is not necessarily designing or producing clothing. We're very, very much focused on the identity side of things. So if you think about fashion in your functional life, what you guys are wearing right now, you're telling stories with it. You're profiling yourselves in a very curated way in your physical lives, and we have the exact same need in the virtual lives as well. It's just we don't have the best tools or the best fashion in our virtual lives yet. There's not so much choice to be really made to create your identities in a very specific way. So that's part of the core of the Fabricant as well. Creating items and digital fashion items that people will want to use, that they can feel proud of, that they can really go out there and just be like, hey, look at these digital fashion items that I own. So it becomes like a status symbol or a storytelling way for us to connect to each other. So fashion is a communication method, and it will especially be much bigger communication method in the online world.
Yeah, look, I love that. And I'd love to dig into that a little bit deeper, because I think that's one of the things that really stood out the most the first time I encountered, the Fabricant's work, was the power of storytelling. So I'd love to hear, like, what is the role of storytelling in digital fashion and also in the Fabricant's approach?
I would say, I mean, storytelling goes far and wide, into our lives. We kind of say it's the ultimate form of connecting with each other since the early days of humanity. And for me, at the moment, like everything that we've been doing since the beginning is a form of storytelling. Essentially, me coming from film and visual effects, that was the only thing that I did. And to notice that fashion actually has the same components to it. It's a form of communicating. It's a form of connecting to people. It's a form of self-expression and identity. Especially the side of self-expression is so important, because I think everybody realizes that even when I put on a black t-shirt today, that I am telling a story. Like I could say like, no, I don't want to tell a story with my clothing, but then that becomes the story of the clothing. So especially for us to truly connect to people through digital fashion, storytelling becomes one of the most important components of creating that connection, because we don't have the tangibility. We have people coming up to us. It's like, how do I touch it? How do I wear it? What do I do with it? So we need to give them the tools to be able to tell what that story is. Why should they buy it? And once they buy it, what can they do with it? because they're going to get the same questions coming from their community. They're going to be like, why did you buy this digital fashion item? It doesn't make sense. You can't touch it. You can't wear it. So we need to give them the tools to be able to tell that story of what that is. And, having spoken to Aphrodite earlier on, I think she put it very beautifully there. Yeah, it's identity, it's self-expression. I think those are the key components when it comes down to virtual fashion. But it goes much, much further. And we all have a different way of doing it. The way I profile my story online through digital fashion is different from Adriana. So we also can't box it in to be like, oh yeah, it's that one story that resonates with everybody. No, everybody has their different ways of connecting to digital fashion through their own personal stories.
Yeah, and adding to that, one of the things we talk a lot internally is that we are not selling a product, we're selling a story, right? And actually the fashion industry is all about storytelling. Why you're buying, a bag for 4,000 euros versus for $4. It is a story. It's not only the craftsmanship, it's the story that brand is telling you, is the belonging of being part of a tribe. And that tribe has been built through a consistent storytelling of what that brand is all about. So we actually believe that our role within the ecosystem of digital fashion is to be a curated storytelling brand, because that is what identities, how identities will be formed. And especially in these early days of the industry, it is about giving the meaning, the deeper meaning, not only the functional meaning where I can wear it, but the emotional meaning of why should I care about it? Why should I acquire a digital item right now? And that is for us super important. So we are very curated on our drops. We don't drop like every week, every day. No, we actually spend a lot of time creating those narratives, whether it is through our own label or partnering with other labels. What is the story we're trying to say? How are people going to experience it? How they're going to express themselves? And really using I would say the team that we have is quite special, because we have traditional fashion designers, which are all about concepting and narrative and storytelling and design, right? Then we have visual effects, game engineers, and then we have, the traditional blockchain engineers and product nerds. And we have these three disciplines around the table working together on how can we tell that story, make the experience rich, and ultimately create a functional use for that item as well.
I love that. And that leads us to today, where I want to learn more about the Primal Rave collection and try to understand your vision behind it.
We have always been about how can we reinvent the industry. So everything that we do has that thought behind of how can we do it differently than the physical industry would do. And one of the things that we question is this idea of seasons, right? Because in the physical industry, you have seasons and you have collections. Well, in the digital world, there are no seasons. So why do we need to actually drop as spring, summer, fall, winter? Why do we need to have this kind of short collections? And we decided to try something new, which was a long form storytelling of fashion. So the Primal Rave is the end of a chapter called Whole Land. And Whole Land started in January. And we also there thought, well, instead of starting with clothes, what if we start a collection with the accessories? So you collect first your earrings, and then you start building your looks after that. So the first drop were digital earrings. And then from there, if you had the earrings, you had access to benefits throughout the narrative. The second drop were headpieces, where you could co-create and create your own. And now the final drop is the clothes, which are the head-to-toe looks. The entire collection is inspired by the Dutch 17th century cloth and craftsmanship. Why? Because we're Dutch. And, we just have this very rich story in all this archive, and we collaborated with a museum, and the team got super excited about the archive piece and decided to pull that in, the story. And the other part of the narrative is the rave techno music, which Amsterdam is very known for. AD is coming in October. The whole world comes here, and that is also like a big part of the narrative. And then the third piece is more very much from our creative director, this whole kind of more Asian culture and mystical, and she infused that in. So the whole collection has these three elements in the concept as base. And again, Primal Rave is the grand finale. It's the grand finale when you see everything that was part of the collection styled in looks, which are then showed in the form of a show. And there again, we felt like, how could we create a new form of show that is not a catwalk, that is not purely a video, that actually allow people to be part of it? So we are launching at the end of the month an immersive show which was built on Unreal Engine gaming, which is super beautiful. It's the highest definition. And instead of watching it, you actually walk through it. And you walk through this rave in the forest that brings all these elements of the concept together. And you experience that narrative, the grand finale of the narrative. So there are 6 looks head to toe, which, anybody, well, not anybody because it's a VIP only, but our holders and a few people from our connection. After that, you're going to be invited. We'll be there experiencing it for the first time. And again, we hope to inspire the industry. We hope to inspire people to kind of, see digital fashion in real life, but also inspire the industry to move on, to really redefine these concepts and embrace new ways of telling the stories.
So I had the pleasure of previewing the short film that you created to accompany this collection. I've seen it 100 times. And I understand more than most people the narrative necessary to create a collection, whether it is physical or digital. We don't create anything inside of a vacuum. But I'd love to understand why you decided to dedicate so much energy and resources into creating this short film.
Well, it's an extension of what Adriana was saying. Again, really challenging the limitations of what can be done with physical fashion. Physical fashion is a lot about the runway, and it has been about the runway for about 100 years. And fashion films actually started coming out maybe about 10 years ago, that they really started getting very popular. And they utilized many of the traditional storytelling techniques, film techniques to do that. So again, we want to take that into its evolution to the next phase, where we get to do things that are not physically possible, where we do get to challenge all the norms and everything that has been done in the physical fashion industry. So it's not a repeat, so it's not on the same cycle. So it really challenges the way we visualize fashion, but also the way that we utilize storytelling. So when you do see the fashion show, you do see that there's a lot of references and quite sexual way of approaching it, but it's not realistic. We're not using like real human skin or real humans. We're using avatars. So we're really focusing on finding this middle ground between being completely digital but also being photorealistic, and just find a twist to it, and a new place, a new narrative, and a new visual style that hopefully intrigues and inspires not only people within the fashion industry but also outside of the fashion industry to really look at it and be like, whoa, what is this? What's going on? Make them feel uncomfortable, but also comfortable enough to want to watch the whole thing. So it is a little bit of challenging, a little bit poking, questioning, and drawing people in out of curiosity, because there is a lot of newness around it. So that's why it's so playful. That's why there's a lot of newness around it. And really just doing things that can't be done physically. That's always the mantra that we take everything from, because otherwise, why wouldn't we just photograph or just film something that can already exist? So it's super important to always just be playful, have fun, be experimental, and not worry too much about what people do think, but do respect the audiences to want for them to take part in this journey.
Yeah, and the film makes it also more accessible. As I said, like the show will have a limitation of seats, participation, but the video makes the story be distributed more broadly. And also there again is a new business model for the industry. We say we're gonna sell the video, right? We're gonna sell the clothes, we're gonna sell the video. The show can travel the world. So why can't we adopt these new methods, these new ways in the physical industry? So I think we're always thinking about how can we take it more from what we're doing as well? How can we expand it? And again, try new things.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think that really like lies at the core of the space, is like that willingness to experiment and embrace like what is a new horizon. So taking a look into the Primal Rave collection, I see it's like, quite affordably priced. I think the pieces are between like $30 and $70 each. Each one comes with a 3D file, Ready Player Me, and an AR wearable. And I'm just curious, like what was your approach to sort of like determining that pricing and that approach, and what does the consumer look like in these early innings? Like, who is purchasing digital fashion currently?
Very, very good question. So a few things there. Of course, we monitor the market, and that's super important. We also talk to our community, and we did a lot of research on the pricing. So that is more, I would say, the technical side. The other side is what we are doing. This collection took almost a year for the team to put together, like end to end, the entire narrative. It's really like when people think about digital fashion, especially in the days of AI, well, in a few hours you put it together. No, it's really like there is such a high level of detail. It's highly, highly designed, and the craftsmanship is insane. But we also wanted to have had this high level of quality, but we wanted to make it accessible. So that is, again, kind of how can we try a new model where we can merge the two rather than making fixed it and not accessible, make it more accessible. We are there is the boots we give for free, which for us is also like, how can we onboard people in the experience at the lowest barrier possible, right? So I think that there is that side of us that wants to make it accessible, wants people to try it out, and therefore wants to make a price that is interesting. The fact that we are also on Flow has traditionally a lower price point than the Ethereum community, so that also plays a role. But ultimately, using these two, I would say the more us always define the industry versus what's the true sentiment for pay. That's what determines the price of the items right now.
So I think it's interesting that you're talking about accessibility, but important to note, the supply size is quite small. And also, I'm one of the lucky few who gets to watch your runway show. And I want you to expand upon those ideas of exclusivity in the space and you continuing that story as well.
Yeah, very good, which kind of leads to Matt's question, who is buying it, right? And there again, we continue talking to the community and understand who is in our community. And traditionally, our community has always been, and we're very proud of it, been done and composed of creators, so digital creators. And that comes from our history on the early days and to the day of today as well. We have been giving away our 3D files because we always believe in democratizing the industry. We always believe in collaboration and co-creation, right? So we had in our old website, we were giving away these files and we got 40,000 kind of downloads of files. And again, these were early days. So our community traditionally has been very much from creators. And we're very proud of that. We give a lot of content and tutorials. The next to that, what we had as being blockchain is Web3 collectors. Is almost like the niche of the collectors, right? It's people that really gravitate into fashion, believe that in the change that the fashion industry is going to go through, and believe in the narrative we are telling. I think that is the second, I would say, big piece of our community and the people that are buying. And then as we partner with traditional brands, and we did actually 2 drops in July, which were very telling on how the industry is going, we start actually getting mainstream, you would say consumers, right? I hate the word consumers, but people that just love physical fashion. And the interesting thing there is that when we dropped that collection, the collection of digital items sold in higher quantity than the physical ones and actually generated additional revenue, which is kind of really interesting how, tapping into how it's evolving, we're getting more and more mainstream adoption. But because your question back to why we're limiting the amounts, one is for the free items, we have a lot because we want to onboard these new people in. But for the items of the collection, the looks, we made it, relatively scarce. It's still quite a big supply, but relatively scarce, because we acknowledge that our traditional buyers, which are Web3 buyers, value the scarcity side of things. So we're kind of trying to make the combination of how can we make it accessible and, be able to onboard people that otherwise wouldn't, while honoring, I would say, probably the ethos and the dynamics of the Web3 space.
I mean, I would say that's not just Web3. I am a sucker if I know this is the last of something. This is a vintage of something. No one else can have it after me. And so I love that you're continuing that. And it also starts leading into the questions of, how do you define couture in the digital space? And I know Carrie has a lot to share about that, because it's something that we've talked about in the past.
For me, I mean, when you look at the technical meaning of couture, it basically just means sewing. But what is couture for us, and what is couture for digital fashion? It essentially is craftsmanship, and the craftsmanship of the technology itself, the craftsmanship of the creativity, craftsmanship of multiple different industries coming together to collaborate this new world. So it's not only what we call the product, which is the digital fashion item, the digital fashion clothing itself. It's also the blockchain development side. It's also the visual effects side of things. So it's the co-creation and collaboration of industries coming together to craft the new meaning of digital fashion. And our focus point with the Fabricant has always been high quality. So we take, high quality craftsmanship of traditional fashion. As Adriana was saying, we have, let's say, an interesting team of people within the Fabricant. So we have the traditional fashion designers who bring the traditional craft of, drawing patterns, constructing patterns to make shapes. They talk about silhouettes, they talk about drapes, they utilize the language of traditional fashion, and then they pass that on to the visual effects designers who utilize the tools and techniques and the language of the visual effects industry. And that's when they start doing things like materials, lighting, rendering, and a lot of other technical jargon to bring the fashion to life, to honor and respect the storytelling, as we were talking about, to bring that storytelling layer into the digital fashion side of things. And then through that, it goes to the developers who create the scarcity, who create the ownership layer for digital fashion. So for me, the uniting word here is craftsmanship, and just really coming in and being like, okay, well, how do we make it bigger? How do we make it better? And how do we ensure that it is something that is interesting for the people to buy? And when we talk about the different senses that fashion really taps into, well, sight is the biggest one, because it's something that you see. So it has to be beautiful, or it has to be really ugly, but it has to be something that you connect to it. It really just has to spark interest in it, because the worst thing that you can do is people just not caring about it at all, having no reaction. And fashion is about emotion. So it's about bringing the emotional layer into digital fashion. So when you look at a digital clothing and you don't feel anything, then we've done our job very badly. You gotta hate it or you gotta love it, but you cannot not care about it. So it is emotion and craft, as in normal couture, as in physical couture. And we are making the statement that we will be part of the Federation of Haute Couture in Paris sooner or later. It might take some time, but we need to get those guys warmed up for the idea as well, that there is a lot of craft and passion behind digital fashion. It's not just something that, you just bust open a 3D software and, you just design some stuff and you have fashion. No, you do need to have the foundation of what does fashion mean. You do need to have the foundation of fashion design to be able to make these items, and then take them further. So not just what we call digital twins. So it's not just a representation of a physical item, but actually add that layer on top, which makes it more interesting in the digital space.
Amen to that. I appreciate all those points. And especially, our mission here at NFT Now is to empower the creators of culture and to bring this technology from niche to mainstream. So everything you're speaking about, joining the Federation, bringing this to the mainstream, is music to our ears here. I'd love to hear your perspective, because obviously this is a fast growing space, but it is still early. Like, what do you think it's really going to take for digital fashion to go mainstream?
That's the $1 million question. That's if somebody would know that, it would already be mainstream. So it's all about looking into the crystal ball of the future, and just like with any, let's say, trends that we've seen in the past 2 decades, from internet, from social media, from mobile phone, it's typically been that there needed to be a technical infrastructure upgrade in one form or another. The idea of AI, internet, VR, AR, they have been around for decades, but you really needed something to go forward for that to become accessible for, let's say, users, or the word that Adriana hates, consumers. And what we see now with essentially with AI, it's like all of a sudden we have all of these AI tools that anybody can use in their daily lives. But this hasn't been the case for as long as AI has been around. So for me, there's a few technological things that would really help us out, because we already have beautiful fashion. We already have the tools to produce and design amazing fashion. And there are certain platforms. So certain things that I'm super excited about that I really want to see. Well, Web3 gaming. So, what is Web3 gaming? Essentially, gaming platforms that are open for companies like us to actually distribute our clothing onto any platform. Because right now we have the challenge with the gatekeepers of the publishers of the world. We can't just put it on Fortnite. We can't just put it on, the games that are being played the most. Then the accessibility of something like augmented reality filters. Not everybody cares for filters at the moment. So once that technology becomes better, because right now, sometimes you see these items, they don't track so well on the body. They're not high quality. And as I was saying earlier on, we need digital fashion to be high quality at all stages. So the way that we showcase digital fashion through technologies like AR filters, it just needs to be high quality. It needs to track on the body perfectly. What we have internally within the Fabricant already, we can put digital fashion on our calls. So when we have internal calls with the Fabricant, we can put on glasses, headwear. We can put on basically the whole land collection on ourselves. But we don't think it's high quality enough yet to be doing it everywhere and all the time. So we need to push that forward. And then, of course, everybody was hypothesizing about what is Apple going to launch with their Apple Vision Pro. So we've seen now the first phase of what's coming. It does not have, let's say, a digital fashion component to it, but we are going to start seeing some experimentation happening between digital fashion and Apple Vision Pro. But yeah, certain things that we need is amazing face tracking, amazing body tracking, and what we call within the Fabricant, we're hypothesizing for 2026, what we call the post-AR revolution, which you can call it, whether it's AI driven, I don't know what the hype word will be, but it's essentially the ability for all of us to sit on this call and exchange clothes in high quality. So I will not be able to determine if you're wearing physical clothing or digital clothing. That, like, once we have that accessibility and the computing power behind our mobile phones and our laptops, that's going to be a total inflection point, because digital fashion is already here. We don't need to, design more. We just need more use cases. We need that use case that will make people wake up in the morning and ask themselves, what are they going to wear digitally today? Because right now we only have that question for ourselves physically, but we're not like jumping out of bed and be like, let me dress my avatar for today. Some kids probably do, but we need more use cases. So I think that the utilities from gaming, from interactive, those are going to be the two big ones. And with it, the internal discussions we have is maybe 2025, 2026, that's going to be that point.
I think a lot of what we talk about internally is indeed like, what are the occasions, right? We wear fashion in occasions. I go for a party, I go to work. Like, what are those occasions right now? And to Carrie's point, it's already happening. We have enough digital occasions, but we need to be able to distribute it across those occasions, right? There are 300 million daily participants in video calls. There is enough occasion, right? There are 750 million daily use of filters. There's another occasion. So a lot of the work our engineers do right now is how can we distribute it seamlessly. And to Carrie's point, some of these platforms are closed. So that is where we are strong believers. We're super bullish in Web3 because we believe that the world is decentralized and the next evolution of internet is decentralized. So those developments need to come hand in hand so that we're able to, in a decentralized manner, distribute those files, right? So there are no gatekeepers, and that you can then truly foster a creator's economy. So we feel like that the occasions are right there. We are working really strong on distributing to the open spaces on the highest quality level. And there is the third pillar, which always is when things accelerate, is the infrastructure layer, whether it is UX of blockchain, whether it is computer power or hardware, which will also kind of, be able to bring it to the masses. But it's very close. Every day we believe it's, sometimes people say, when is it going to be there for the masses? I say, well, depends on the day, depends on the week. I could say it's tomorrow. And when I'm like a bit more negative, I say, well, it's going to take 5 years or 10 years. But we feel like it is actually closer. It is a 25, 26. That's where we're looking at right now.
So I love that Carrie and Adriana, you both we've spoken to the technology and also the emotional attachment to digital fashion. But I'm curious, why do you think some of the more traditional fashion houses have been reluctant to adopt digital fashion?
I'm not sure if they're reluctant, to be honest, because if you look at in the NFT booms, fashion was the biggest industry that actually adopted NFTs, right? So it was the number one industry. There were more than 70 fashion projects happening. And most of them actually were driven by big fashion houses. And I think it's the nature of the innovators, right? So if anything, I do feel that there is a lot of appetite. The industry has changed a lot since we started in 2018. Nobody understood. Right now, they're coming to us and say, can you help us to get into this space? And again, the interesting thing is because we have our own label, but we build infrastructure next to that. With the platform, we're able to actually onboard those brands into the space. And most recently, we did the 3 drops, one with Weekday, which is like a Gen Z, part of the H&M group, actually, a lovely brand, but a huge fast fashion group, right, behind. And it was amazing working with them. They were super curious because they are so into like youth culture that for them, this was second nature, but they couldn't get there. Then we did the drop with High Snobiety, again, very much of that kind of high street edge culture. They wanted to get in, but they didn't know how, and we were able to pull them in. And then the last drop was with Tommy Hilfiger, which was much more geared to gaming and game infrastructure. And same story, they believe in it. They just don't have the means to get there. And I feel that right now is more about not having the means, the knowledge, and maybe the infrastructure to be able to truly leverage it rather than we don't know, we don't believe in it.
So what I'm hearing is it's a lack of education, a lack of resources, something that both the Fabricant and NFT now are working to onboard more people into this.
Makes a lot of sense. And I know that we are currently in the midst of New York Fashion Week. And so I'm curious, since the beginning, what has been the trajectory that you've witnessed or that you've experienced for digital fashion having a footprint at fashion weeks across the globe?
I love that. So actually, the great story there is we've probably been rejected from all fashion weeks since the beginning. And this year is the first year that we're actually part of the fashion weeks, so we're there. So that's where we see a big transition and big change that the world has woken up to digital fashion. The traditional physical fashion industry is really looking at it from how does it change from the internal processes and how does it actually become a new business model for them, to Fashion Week starting to now adopt digital fashion companies and digital only fashion designers. So yeah, it's great to see how fast that kind of moved from being rejected to actually they're welcoming us with open arms. And why I think that is, I think it's really because of the newness factor. If anything that these fashion weeks need are new experiences, are new ways to engage with their audiences, and of course reach. So going beyond the just these physical events and actually being able to connect virtually as well, of course, gives them a much, much larger audience. So there's a lot of opportunity in digital fashion. And to your point, Matt, that, it's just like, yeah, they don't maybe have like all the resources at the moment, but now they're really starting to look into them and be like, okay, well, what is a small thing that we can do, and how can we actually scale that up and to be able to connect much further into different audiences right now.
Yeah, and to Aphrodite's point, I think being on the fashion weeks is critical for that education, right? For the increase of that visibility, for the embracing of the newness. So if you, one is super cool because finally they got it and they let us in, but equally it is part of our mission to keep poking and but also to keep kind of showing the way, right? How I can do it differently.
While we are on the subject of Fashion Week, I'm not sure many of our audience members are aware of how wasteful Fashion Weeks can be. All the money and energy and resources and physical materials that we build and we create for a 15-minute fashion show that I've queued up an hour for, and then it's done and it's gone forever. Talk to me more about your visions about sustainability and what you have created and what you are continuing to create with the Fabricant and your ideas of the new runway show.
Yeah, 100%. And if anything, like sustainability has been so much part of our agenda from day one, so much so that we had this intuitive belief that digital was more sustainable than physical. But of course, then we got all these questions. Yeah, but what about computer powering? What about blockchain? And we had to do our research. So we partner with an institution in the UK, and we run a research, look at the entire life cycle of a product. We didn't even look at shows back then. We're just like a product, a physical product versus a digital one. And we were able to prove that a digital item, taking everything into account, was 97% more sustainable than a physical one. So there is a big sustainability win there, right? And to your point, when you think about the shows which we haven't measured, that's a good challenge for the next one. But like intuitively, you would say, with all that waste of traveling, of materials, of energy, to your point, to a 15-minute show, right? And right now with our digital show, we can actually be everywhere. We can show you any fashion week, right? So intuitively, I would say it is more sustainable. Based on the research we have done, we can prove it's more sustainable. I think it's, to your point, a selling point for the industry to say, try it differently, right? Why only one fashion week? Why don't you want to be in the entire globe, but in a new way, in a more sustainable way? And also, I dare to say, in a much more engaging and interesting way, because instead of just watching it, you can actually get in and immerse yourself and look at things from, almost touching them very close by. And even, after the show, you can immediately wear them.
Yeah, and to add to that, Aphrodite, you said it as well, like the fashion brands, they put so much effort into that 15-minute runway show. It's like literally like 6 months just planning for that 15-minute moment. And once it's done, it's done. It's never to be witnessed again. You see some photographs and video of it, but you're not experiencing it again. And this, again, is the power of digital fashion, is to bring the continuity to it, is to have something that you can open again, that you can open 20 years from now and be like, hey, let's experience that again. And to add to that as well, the additional business model. So once you create digital content, once you create digital assets, you can actually monetize it. You can distribute it to multiple different platforms. So that's what I love about let's say the power of digital fashion. It's not so much focused on this one-off moment, but it's actually creating continuity and more of a long form moment. So there's addition to creativity, so of course all creative directors like to go into that of like, how can they be more creative within the shows? And then the business model side, it's for any fashion brand to actually connect to these digital technologies is a new scalable way of doing business. And it will actually help a lot of independent creators to actually, let's say, compete against the larger brands.
Great insights. Well, look, as we look to move towards a close, I would really just love to hear what's next for the Fabricant. Like, what can our audience look forward to? What should we have on our radar as we look towards the final quarter of the year and heading into 2024?
Cool. I'll take that, and then Adriana can build on it, because she's on the front lines of building like crazy at the moment. So we've spoken about it a few times now, the utility of digital fashion. So digital fashion is already there, but we need more of those use cases for people to want to interact with digital fashion. From true fashionistas to non-fashionistas, we want everybody to wear digital clothing. And one of the best and most obvious use cases right now is the video calls that we're on. So we're essentially building the ability for people to buy our digital clothing and then wear it immediately on the video calls, and also to make content for social media. Those are let's say the dead obvious ones where people understand digital fashion. So that's something that we're going to be showcasing very soon. I don't know, Adriana, how much you want to share, when and how and what that is.
Yeah, I can share a bit more. I think from a vision level, what we're really passionate about in the coming phase of the Fabricant is this concept of a digital fashion house expanded, where right now what the industry has done is a lot of one-off drops, right? I think we all have seen, digital fashion drops, on-chain one-offs, and we believe that we're getting to a point that brands are going to commit to the space and stay. So we are now actively talking to curating brands that we believe have the right profile from a culture defining ethos to actually be part of our digital fashion house, so that we're going to have continuous labels. I always say, if LVMH would be born today in today's world, they would not own the labels. They would actually have the infrastructure to nurture those labels, and that's our ambition. So that is the space where we're going to, and it's really exciting. The conversations are very exciting. Another big piece for us from the roadmap is that we're expanding into the EVM network of ecosystem. So we are going into Ethereum, and that is super important, because we believe that's where the builders are, that will enable us to improve our tooling and also to expand our reach. So that is super important. It's a big alpha. That's coming soon. And then to Carrie's point is occasions, fashion occasions. What we already do, we have the AR filters. That's great. That is working. We have the Red Play Me collaboration. That's great. That's working. We have our 3D files for our creators. What we believe very strongly is this setting. This setting, when we have creative people around the video call, you want to express yourself. Aphrodite has these beautiful earrings. We want to add more earrings to her collection. They're going to be digital ones. And we are now into a very strong R&D phase. We believe that beginning next year, we'll be able to release it. And then getting in touch with the different platforms to make it a seamless experience, right? Because ultimately, it needs to be seamless. We all used in today's world with one-click buy, one-click try. We want to make that experience seamless. But that's an occasion that we really believe in, and that is coming very soon. And the other occasion that we also in a very strong piloting is just using AI for your dressing. So what would it be to just extend that content creation through AI? We have done quite a lot of experiments already, and it's something that is also in our kind of development pipeline, and we'll continue. Gaming is, of course, an important one. There is a lot of R&D on expanding to those occasions and expanding the opportunities of wearing your digital items for those that are owning it. Ultimately, we believe that our digital wardrobe is going to be larger and richer than our physical one.
There it is. And Adriana, we love the alpha here at NFT Now, so I have to ask a little bit more about the move to Ethereum. That is some big news right there. That's really significant. Tell us just a little bit about what that entails, what that timeline looks like, and kind of what the the kind of the contributing factors were that led to that decision.
Yeah, great question. So we're going to be launching our EVM platform end of this year. And the reason why we're moving there, Adriana already touched upon it a little bit. It's going to help us have a richer tooling. It's going to help us connect to a larger developer base. It's going to help us connect to larger community. So there's a lot of it's a lot about it is reach, because we are true believers that blockchain will be in the background in the future. But right now, as we're still in this world where we need to interact with wallets, we need to be able to interact with crypto and understand this new use of flow, these new technologies. It does mean that we do need to be connecting to a wider audience. And the reason why we went with Flow first, we have great connection with Dapper Labs. Flow blockchain is a great technology. There's a lot of things that we can do with it that is only possible with Ethereum these days. But yeah, it's the community is much smaller there, and it's been much harder to, let's say, connect to, let's say, the Web3 audience through that community. And we see Ethereum actually being mature. It's moved fast so forward, and with protocols like ERC-6551 that was developed by also one of our great friends and investors, Benny, and his gang. They're doing amazing things there, and now all of a sudden, we have a great tool set to actually express the way that we always wanted to express digital fashion. And the ERC-6551 just plays a very big role when it comes down to us wanting to build a wardrobe, because it actually allows for people to mix and match their items authentically on chain.
Makes a ton of sense. Thank you, Carrie, Adriana. So appreciate you joining us today on the NFT Now podcast. So insightful, and really excited to learn more about what you have coming and see the next chapter of the Fabricant come to life.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Love that conversation, especially everything about the importance of storytelling in digital fashion, the slow embrace we're seeing from the traditional establishment, and of course, that million-dollar question of what it's going to take to bring this movement mainstream. I think high quality and accessible collections like Primal Rave are an important step in the right direction. And you can learn more about it at thefabricant.com/primalrave. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please head to your streaming service of choice and leave us a review. We love the stars, we love your feedback, and each comment you leave actually helps surface what we're doing for a wider audience. Thank you again, and we will see you next week on the NFT Now podcast.